Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rebecca, and thanks very much for those of you on the call today for making the time, and for those of you who are watching it in another dimension after today. So yeah, my name is Fiona Flemington. I'm an associate of Rebecca Ray Coaching Consultancy, and the tool that I'm going to introduce you to today is called CPI 260, which stands for Californian Psychology Inventory. And it's called 260 because when you complete it, there are 260 questions to answer. However, what I would say is it's either a yes or a no or a don't know. So it's not as you know, you probably need about half an hour, 40 minutes to complete the questionnaire. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm a qualified, I qualified, oh gosh, 15 years ago through the Oxford Psychology Press, OPP, as someone who can work and feedback on a number of psychometric assessments. So some that you will have heard of probably is MBTI, I think it's probably the most popular. And the second most popular, I would say, is CPI, so this California Psychology Inventory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you today. I'm going to show you a little video that the Myers-Briggs company who own the license for the CPI 260 assessment show. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it works. I'm going to show you a sample report and get you to have a think about what yours might look like, of course, and finally talk about the benefits of it and where you can use it and how you might be able to use it. And finally, we've had some really lovely soundbite feedback from clients, so I'm going to share a couple of that with you as well. So I think will probably take us just over 2 o'clock, so I should be able to give you hopefully a little bit of time back, which is very important. So first of all, I'll just share the screen. Can you see that all right? Yeah, brilliant. And what am I going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about what it is, first of all, who's it for, and what insights will it give us? So what I call the so what and the now what. The impact that it has on the individuals, and then the impact that it has on the organisation, and the benefits that it could bring to your organisation should you at some point wish to use this tool as part of your sort of leadership toolkit, I suppose. So the way I always introduce leadership personally is I always talk about the 3 dimensions of leadership. So for me, it's very, very straightforward. As an executive coach, the thing I always say to my clients is, here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with those 3 dimensions. First of all, lead yourself, lead others, and lead the organizations. And this is I think, just a very straightforward model around what's required of you as a leader. And those of you like Nicola, who's in a HR position, will probably hopefully agree and testify that it all starts with you. So lead yourself is really, really important. Know thyself and lead yourself, I would say. So one of the things that this particular psychometric gives you is a real insight into you. It's not based on a 360 feedback report where you'd get lots of people to contribute into one report and then you get a profile. This is very much about you completing the profile, and then my job is to interpret the results, to produce a report, and then feed that report back to the client. So if I give you an example, when I worked for Royal London Insurance, we had a large group of leaders. I think there was a total of about 120, and we'd also merged with Scottish Life. So one of the things that we did, or that I did as part of a small assessment leadership development team, is that we ran a number of assessment and development centres for all these leaders. And as part of that, every leader was given the CPI 260 to complete. Because what we found is that you had some leaders who had quite good emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And then you had some leaders who sort of sat in the middle, and some who just didn't have a clue. So what we decided to do is we ran these development centres. We ran about 15 in total, and we had small groups of leaders from the organisation, and they was part of a full day of assessment, and one of them was the CPI. So my job as an assessor and as a leadership development specialist was not only to feed back their results, but to give them some thoughts around what could be areas for development. So they had a really robust development plan as a result of attending the development centre. But most importantly, they had an insight into themselves. And as I said, on a scale of 1 to sliding scale on a continuum, some had a really good understanding of themselves, others not so good. So lead yourself, leadership always starts with you. Lead others. So the CPI 260 assessment gives you a snapshot and an insight into how you might lead other people. Again, it's always interesting, as I encourage my leaders to do, is go and talk to your teams about these results, see what they say, see what they think about what the report says. And finally, lead the organisation, because the better the leadership that you have in any organisation, hopefully the better the results that you will achieve, but also the team. If you think about management, leadership of the team, if you think about engagement, if you think about talent planning, if you think about recruitment, it all kind of comes together under, I think, these 3 dimensions. So CPI for me touches everything of the 3 dimensions of leadership. So that's why I recommend it to a number of clients, because it is individual. The thing with some of the psychometrics is that you could be a type and there might be 6 other people who have that type in that room. Whereas with this, you've completed it, these are your results, and it's all bespoke to you. And you filled it in. So it's all about you. So let me just show you what we'll cover today. So first of all, what is it? Who's it for? What insights will it give us? And the what next? So what we're going to do first of all is I'm just going to stop the share for a minute and just set up a video clip to show you, which hopefully will work. Just get that to work now. It's not coming up, but I'll just put it up here now. So can you?
In order to meet complex business demands, what leaders are expected to do has changed. Do you know where your leaders stand? To improve as a leader, people need to see themselves as other people see them, something that's hard to do objectively without the right tools. They could ask their coworkers, managers, or direct reports, but depending on the connection they have with them, they may not get an unbiased answer. So how do people get the kind of valuable information that drives real transformation to successful leadership? By using the right tool for the job. The CPI 260 tool is an individual assessment different from other tools. It's quantitative, it's unbiased, and it's uncanny in objectively describing you as others would. This powerful tool can assess leadership potential in the workplace and supports leadership development, executive development, performance improvement, succession planning, selection and retention, and coaching high potentials. Other leadership assessments, such as 360 tools, ask peers, reports, and managers for feedback. While 360 tools are useful in some situations, this can be uncomfortable for the leader and those asked to contribute, and may lead to sugarcoating, biased responses, or potential friction afterwards. The CPI 260 assessment describes individuals objectively, as someone who knows the individual really well would do, but without having to ask them. The CPI 260 tool measures individuals on 29 direct scales and competencies related to personal and work style characteristics, motivations, and thinking styles. Think of it as 29 tiny personality tools packed into one, which provides a data-rich pool of unbiased, actionable insights about a person. Each one of these 29 scales holds a wealth of information about strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities to grow as a leader. The CPI 260 assessment doesn't sugarcoat results. It gives usable, objective insights that help leaders and potential leaders better understand themselves and improve their performance as a result. This quantitative approach gives you something most other tools can't. It lets you see how a person compares to other successful executives and managers. You can compare individual scores with 5,600 other leaders who've already been successful and see where they can improve the most. You can also use this information to design a leadership development program tailored according to the unique results on each of the 29 scales, helping your people become more effective, more productive, and overall better leaders. Learn more about how you can use empirical, unbiased personality insights to discover and develop stronger leaders today with the CPI 260 assessment.
There we go. So go back to the slides. So as it sort of stated in the video clip, the CPI is organised into 5 what we call core performance categories. So what you'll see in the video was them scrolling down between each of the 5, and then under each of those 5 characteristics, categories is the leadership characteristics. So these are the 5 that we focus on, or that the tool focuses on. And as I said, there's 29 leadership characteristics that we look at in total. So as you can see, the first area, lead yourself, self-management. So very much around the self-awareness, self-control, levels of resilience. One of the things that the CPI does tell me is how the person is fulfilled in their life right now. So it's on a scale of 1 to 7. So 7 being high and obviously 1 being low. So one of the conversations that I can have with a client or a leader is to say, you've scored really high, so this would indicate that you're at high levels of satisfaction personally and professionally right now. Tell me a little bit more about that. Or in some cases, you know, if it's 3 or below, it would indicate that maybe there's something else going on in their life, or something that's impacting their personal levels of well-being. So again, it's a nice thing to have that conversation with. It also talks about, if you think about lead the business and lead the organization, so organizational capabilities, how do they feel with organizational structure? How do they achieve in maybe an independent structure or a structure that's quite tight? What's their use around how do they assert their power and authority? So one of the leadership characteristics is dominance. So we look on a sliding scale of 0 to 100, and again, the scale that we're looking at is every leader sits between 40 and 60. That's what we call it, the mean score. If you go over 60, that would indicate that your behaviour will be more towards the description on the right-hand side, and I'll show you this in the report. And if you're lower on the scale, it would indicate that your behaviour, your characteristic is more towards that end of the scale. So it's really interesting because most people will sit between 40 and 60, but I would say in every report there's usually about 4 or 5 where someone has a characteristic that either is below that mean score or above it. So again, that's where we'd sit and explore that and find out a little bit more. Team building and teamwork, so lead the team. How good are they on an interpersonal basis? So again, one of the characteristics is insightfulness. Another characteristic is empathy. So again, it's really interesting when you're working with someone, if their empathy score is quite low, then how might that manifest itself in its behaviour in the workplace? Again, we've got problem solving. So how do they handle problems? Again, handling sensitive problems. So one of the characteristics, the scales, is sensitivity. So again, we have a look to see, do we have a bull in a china shop? Or do we have someone who takes their time to think about how they're going to position maybe a piece of feedback that they have to give, or how they're going to talk about someone's performance in a way that's skillful and with sensitivity. And then finally, we've got, again, coming under the whole 3 dimensions, I would say, where are they from a confidence perspective? We look at one called general, a good impression. So we look to see if they, how do they create a good impression? Do they care about creating a good impression, which obviously can sometimes impact how they behave as a leader? How do they feel about change? How do they manage change? And again, that visibility around them as a leader as well. So there's a managerial potential scale characteristics, and there's also a leadership potential characteristic as well. So again, if I know someone's going for an executive head role, for example, there are some of the characteristics of the 29 that I would be more alerted to than perhaps others, just around the fact that with that being a very senior role, with that having lots of exposure to different people, I'd look at their sensitivity score, I'd look at their empathy score, I'd look at their insightfulness score, and I'd look at their managerial potential and leadership score in particular to see how they might fare. And again, If it's used as part of a recruitment basis, what I do is I ask the recruiter, or in this case the school, to send me over the job description, because that's really important for me, because then I can see that the qualities and the characteristics that they're looking for in the role, and then I can really bespoke the report to the client. But also in the wash up, I will meet with the client and say, here's some things to think about. The other thing that I do, if asked, is I will give them interview questions based on the CPI results as well. So what's always interesting, one of the first questions I always say is ask the interviewee what they took away from the conversation with me, and what was two key insights that they identified about themselves, and how they could use that as part of the role moving forward. So again, have they taken that feedback on board? So really important. So the impact and the benefits, really, I mean, again, this is some of the feedback that we've had. We've had improved self-awareness, which is the idea being is that it's a very honest feedback report that I write. Rebecca will hopefully concur that I don't pull any punches when it comes back to feeding these things in. If I give you an example, I had to feed back about 4 months ago to someone who'd gone for an executive head role. And I said to him, you know, this report would identify that you don't ask for feedback and you don't take feedback well. To which he said that was a load of rubbish, and he didn't believe it. So it's kind of like, well, that might be my case. So that was quite insightful. So hopefully, you know, as I said, I don't make stuff up. I read the reports, I interpret the reports, and I feed it back in a skillful way. But nor do I hide away from anything that may be developmental for that individual, as well as superpowers, as I call them, your strengths. These are the things that I say to the individual. This characteristic is really strong for you. This is, I would identify as one of your superpowers as well. So it enables conversations with the line manager to build a robust development plan. So again, in recruitment, even if someone's been unsuccessful, they can still have a really robust development plan as part of this session, because it gives them things to think about in the future, whether or not they were successful or not. Understand your impact on the team. So again, those 3 dimensions coming back to leading others. As mentioned previously at Royal London, we used it as part of our talent planning and future leaders programme. Recruitment and selection. We all know that there's a bit of a war on talent at the moment, so it's really important that we recruit the people and get the people that we want right first time. So again, this gives fresh insights and help and support to HR managers and directors in particular, who sometimes may know the people who are going for the job, and actually they want an independent and objective viewpoint, and you can't get much more than a psychometric profile such as CPI. Again, at Royal London, when we'd finished running the development centres, every leader had 5 coaching sessions. So I was one of the executive coaches that was part of that programme. So again, we had an overall plan around giving everybody coaching that was bespoke to their needs. The other thing that we did is that we pulled all the reports together as a team, and we identified training needs through the CPI 260 reports. So we were able to run bespoke webinars, programs. Everything was based on what the data was telling us from these reports. So that was really helpful. And again, it gives you that improved understanding of your leadership impact. So what I call the shadow of the leader. What's the leadership shadow that you cast? So here's a couple of sound bites just in the last 3 months that I've had. So one of the ladies that I was working with, not last week, but the week before, said to me it was one of the best leadership development sessions that I've had in 20 years of teaching. To be fair to her, she hadn't had a lot, but I spent a little bit of extra time with her. I gave her extra time because she had a lot of questions, and there were things that she wanted to talk through with me as a coach. So one of the things that I said to her is, you know, if you do get the job, here are some of the things that I would focus on to build your strengths. Here's some of the things to think about if you were to get the role where you might need a little bit of help, where some coaching or mentoring would really help you. And here are some things to think about with regards to the stakeholders that you're going to be working with as an executive head. So again, just taking the time to spend time with people to talk about themselves and their development, I think is really important. Robust and insightful, plenty for me to work on. So that was the parting shot of someone a couple of months ago who just found it really helpful because, again, they had very little leadership development. And then I did sort of know some of this stuff. However, now I have real clarity on my strengths and, most importantly, where and how I need to develop. So let me show you just quickly what the report looks like, because I've got that set up as well for you. Can you see that? Okay, yeah, perfect. So this is a sample. Obviously, I'm not going to share with you mine or anybody else's. So this is what it looks like, first of all. And then, as I said, I won't go into all the detail, but again, here's what it's going to cover. It's going to look at how you work with other people, how do you work with convention and values and rules. We have had a couple of rule breakers, and how do you feel about yourself. So we have 4 ways of living, and what it brings up is a diagram, is a lifestyle diagram. Now, again, what it tends to show us is it shows you where you sit in this lifestyle diagram. So this is about how do you favour rules, like stability, agree with others. And of course, the other end of the scale is values, privacy, focus on inner life, confidence, social situation, innate action. So again, what we try to do is get the person to have a think about which one they think they are. And then we will reveal where they sit and tell them a little bit about that particular lifestyle. Now, as I mentioned previously, we look at levels of satisfaction. So this is how satisfied are you with your life, both personally and professionally. As I mentioned, it's on a scale of 1 to 7. Anything sort of 4 and below, I would certainly have a look at. The higher you are in that scale, the more likely you are to behave in that description as well around the lifestyle diagram. So if this person, we've got Catherine Sample, she's on a 6, so we're more likely to see these positive attributes here because she's very, she's obviously in a good place, which is important for mental health. Here's the 5 scales that we talked about, the 5 categories. And then what you'll see here is here's the 5 categories. So if we look at dealing with others here, you can see all the characteristics are listed. Now, what happens is, what I'm looking for as an assessor and as an observer is I'm looking to see if there's anything that's above 60 or anything that's below 40. So again, as you can see, this dominance score is 67. So what I'd try with that client is to say, well, tell me a little bit about how you like to take leadership. How do you like to be in charge? Because 67 is above that norm group. So we'd look to see more of this behavior rather than less of it, or on the other side. Again, you can see most of these scores kind of sit within the 40 to the 60 mean range. So that's really good. Look at that empathy score, 67. Brilliant. So that tells me that that person is probably going to pick up the wants and the needs of other people's. Again, if you're looking at an executive head, I would say that they would be very good at what I'd call situational sensing. So they can walk into a room, have a look and sort of think about, actually, so-and-so doesn't look great over there. I'm not picking up good stuff there. Let me go and have a conversation with them. So again, and also empathy. How can they lead with empathy? Because as we know, empathetic leadership has its place. So again, it's just things to think about overall, if you, depending on the role that that person's in, or perhaps it's part of recruitment. Again, all these scores are good sets of scores, no challenges there. Always look at achievement via conformance to see how do they like to achieve that. Are they happy in a structured environment? So sometimes if you work in a mat, for example, it can be quite structured. There's ways of doing things. So if the achievement via conformance, we have the other end of the scale, probably doesn't like working in a highly structured or regulated sort of environment, and that might not be for you. But again, we have to ask the question and see where people sit with that. There's the insightfulness that I mentioned here. So again, a good score there. Flexibility is on that low score. So again, I might say to people, you know, how do you feel about working in? How do you like change? How do you like to receive your work? How do you like to do your work? What's your thoughts on when you have to change your style or change your approach? Lovely score of 70 here for Catherine Sample, so managerial potential. So that tells me that she would be very well suited to a leadership management role. I wouldn't have any problems in recommending her for a role with a leadership responsibility. And again, I'd probably then look at the leadership score, which you can see is 66. So again, that tells me that those two marry up really well for me. So I'd have no problems in putting them in recommending them, for example, for a senior role. And then, yeah, and that's it. The only other thing that I do is if I see what do you call it really, like competent characteristics that are sort of together. So let me give you an example. So I'd look at managerial potential and leadership. Again, I'd look at those two scales and think where we're at. And then I'd also go to achievement via independence, which is this one here. So how do they like to achieve? So are they independent minded, or how independent minded are they? And then I'd also look at responsibility as well. So again, just to see how do they take responsibility? Do they like responsibility? Can they handle responsibility? And how does that work with regards to how they like to achieve in an environment where they might have to conform, or in an environment where they might have to be independent thinking? So again, you can see these two here. So that would tell me that this individual Catherine Sample is very happy to be in an environment that gives her conformance, and she can also think independently as well. So there's quite a few things as an assessor I would look at. And then I produce a report, a very detailed report, it's usually about 6 or 7 pages. And then I always think it's my responsibility to take that person through that report. There's nothing more that irritates the hell out of me is when people do development centres and they do these wonderful, all these psychometrics, and then no one feeds it back to them. And that for me, I think is doing a disservice to anyone when you don't do that. So I'm really passionate about making sure that that person gets the feedback, they understand it, they have any questions around it, and that they feel they could build a development plan from that assessment, with or without it being part of a recruitment plan. And I'll shut up because I've got on my high horse, haven't I?
No, that's really helpful, Fee. I think just to share with you guys on the call, we, as Fiona mentioned, we've used it for recruitment, but it could be used in leadership development. So we're involved with most of you as on this call as clients, as coaches and facilitators and trainers, and this absolutely could form part of a development program. But really what we've been using it a lot for is to support you in executive and senior leadership recruitment. Particularly the feedback we've been given previously is that it's really helpful when it's an internal candidate, because it really helps them see a lot more about that person's superpowers, as Fiona said, and also development areas. So if they do take those people on, they've got a real head start as to what to work on together and how to support them best in order for them to be successful. Yeah, and the clients that have used it already keep coming back for more because they're really seeing the benefits of it. Any questions from anybody, be it via chat or take yourselves off mute? Any questions at this point? So I've not told you how much it is. I suppose that would be useful for me to tell you. So it's £950 per person, and that is for the whole process. Where Fiona, all we need is the email address of the individual, contact details, We're usually involved in the scheduling of, if it is part of a recruitment process, it usually needs to sit in a particular place. So that's from beginning to end, where Fiona then analyses the results, produces a report, and takes the candidate or the leader through their results with a really rigorous kind of feedback and exploratory conversation, and is also sometimes involved in some panel feedback. So if it is part of a panel, we can also do the feedback to the panel. Fiona's been involved in that too. So if there's no other questions, anything else from you, Fiona, you wanted to add?
No, I just wondered if Nicola had heard of it, because obviously your HR background, I'm sure you've experienced some psychometrics before or used them.
It looks very familiar.
Does it?
Yeah, I've used psychometrics before, and it all looks quite, you know, even the little arrows and all of those on there, they all look like things that I've used before. Yeah.
Great. Well, I've attached on the invite a sample report, so you can have a good look at that and have a see what you'd get as a result. And any questions, do let us know. No problem at all. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for catching up on record, for those of you that have done it, and we hope to speak to you soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.